Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today we're diving into a classic Hindi folk story that perfectly captures some truly profound themes. We're talking resilience, human kindness, and destiny. It's a narrative that kicks off with a dark, relentless storm, painting this vivid picture of absolute despair. But stick with me, because it culminates in literally one of the most heartwarming twists you can imagine. We're going to explore how one destitute man's life is altered forever by a relentless monsoon and, more importantly, by his own unshakable humanity.
Right off the bat, I want you to just keep this question in mind. Can a single act of kindness during a storm change a cursed man's destiny forever? It's really the beating heart of this whole tale. You know, we constantly hear that phrase, what goes around comes around, but this story takes that core concept of karma and absolutely amplifies it against impossible odds. So let's see how a simple, everyday choice to be kind sets off a chain reaction that completely rewrites the future.
Section 1. Dhiru's Relentless Hardship.
Okay, so our story follows Dhiru, who is a destitute laborer, and his fiercely supportive wife, Kajri. They are living in extreme poverty, relying entirely on his daily wages just to survive. But then they get trapped by a week-long monsoon, and their fragile livelihood just spirals into an absolute disaster. Let's walk through this timeline, because it gets grim. On day 1, Dhiru simply can't go to work. The storm is just too violent. By day 2, tragedy actually strikes inside their home. Their flimsy roof starts leaking directly onto the few paper notes he'd saved up. The money gets totally soaked and ruined. I mean, imagine that, your entire life savings destroyed by a leaky roof. So by day 3, completely desperate and terrified of starving, Dhiru really has no choice. He has to brave the torrential rain and head to work, even though he's sick and absolutely freezing.
Now, to truly understand Dhiru's plight, we really have to look at his social context, because Dhiru isn't just poor, he's an orphan. And in his village, instead of getting any sort of sympathy, he's entirely ostracized. When he shows up to work soaking wet, the other villagers just brutally mock him. They literally tell him, "You're a jinx, that's why you have no relatives, no family." They actually blame his orphan status on bad luck. It really highlights Dhiru's deep emotional pain and his total social isolation. He has absolutely zero safety net, financially or emotionally.
Section 2. Exceptional Hospitality and Storm.
But here is where the narrative makes a major shift. On his way home from what was a grueling, super humiliating day at work, Dhiru spots a couple. This is Raman and Janki, and they are stranded and shivering under a tree. They're travelers caught in this deadly storm with literally nowhere to go. So, by bringing them in, despite having almost nothing himself, he and Kajri brilliantly illustrate a core cultural concept, Atiti Devo Bhava. This translates to guests are a form of God. And Kajri, she doesn't complain about their lack of resources. Actually, quite the opposite. Her face lights up with joy because they have guests. They contextualize this unexpected arrival not as a burden at all, but as a genuine divine blessing.
So despite their own extreme material poverty, their actions showcase some seriously exceptional hospitality. First things first, they offer up their meager shelter, giving this couple a safe haven from the deadly storm outside. Then, Kajri immediately heads to the kitchen and somehow, miraculously, manages to cook these diverse, delicious meals with whatever tiny bit of supplies they have left. And finally, they treat these strangers like family. They stay up super late chatting and just offering genuine warmth. I mean, think about it. They are literally starving themselves, yet they joyfully share everything they have.
Section 3. The Cruel Landlord's Punishment.
Unfortunately, Dhiru's real-world problems haven't magically vanished. The very next day, still battling the storm and now burning up with a severe fever after staying up late to entertain his guests, Dhiru reports to the local landlord. This is Thakur Dorjan Pratap, and he is notoriously malicious. While Dhiru is physically exhausted carrying these heavy loads of the warehouse, his weakness just overtakes him. His hands slip, and he drops a single sack of grain directly into a puddle of water, completely ruining the crop inside. Of course, the hostile villagers, who are always eager for an excuse to break him, immediately drag him right in front of the cruel Thakur.
While the Thakur is absolutely furious, Dhiru begs for forgiveness, right? He even offers to have the cost of that single sack slowly deducted from his daily wages. But the landlord issues this impossibly cruel demand. He says, no, you must compensate 3 sacks for 1 sack. It's just pure extortion. He demands triple the compensation before Dhiru is ever allowed to return to work. So in one swift move, he effectively fires him and plunges him into massive debt at the exact same time.
To really wrap your head around the sheer impossibility of Dhiru's situation, let's compare these two colliding realities. On one hand, Dhiru is fired, his life savings are ruined by the rain, and he's entirely socially isolated. There's no one to ask for a loan. On the other hand, the Takor demands he pay for 3 full sacks of grain up front before he can earn another penny. It's an unbridgeable gap. Diru walks home completely shattered. That night, he and Khajri go to sleep hungry and entirely, utterly hopeless.
Which brings us to a huge dramatic climax. I want to pose this directly to you. How on earth will an orphan with no friends, no family, and 0 savings survive this insurmountable debt? The dark clouds of ruin have completely settled over Diru's life. It really feels like the end of the line for him.
Section 4. The Wealthy Merchant's Revelation.
But hey, remember those helpless guests sleeping in the other room? The next morning, the sun finally shines, breaking that week-long monsoon, and an incredible twist is revealed. Raman and Janki step into the courtyard, and they are holding stacks of cash. It turns out, they aren't helpless travelers at all. They're actually incredibly wealthy merchants from the city. They reveal that they deliberately hid their wealth because they were just so tired of sycophants. Much like Diru, they had no close relatives and they were craving genuine human connection. They wanted to find people who would care for them for who they were, not for what was in their wallets. And well, Diru and Khajri, they passed that test with flying colors.
So Raman doesn't just offer sympathy here, he completely 100% reverses Diru's fortunes. First, he immediately hands over the cash to pay off the Takor's impossible debt. This allows Diru to march right back, throw the money in that cruel landlord's face, and leave that abusive job forever. But it gets better. Raman then offers Diru a highly lucrative partnership in his own city business, and honestly, most importantly, Raman treats him as a respected equal. This effectively erases that toxic village stigma that had plagued Diru for his entire life. Talk about a real game changer.
Section 5. A Destined Family Reunion.
Now, you might think the story wraps up right there, right? A nice financial reward for a good deed. But there is a final, massive, emotional crescendo that elevates this from just a simple moral fable into a really profound tale of destiny. As Raman and Janki are packing up, getting ready to head back to the city, Khajri hands Diru a new shirt to wear. She just wants him to look presentable as a new businessman to properly thank Raman. It's such a simple, everyday action. Diru starts changing his clothes right there in the courtyard, and as he takes off his old shirt, he exposes his neck, revealing this very specific, incredibly unique birthmark.
Raman completely freezes. He stares at the mark, tears start welling up in his eyes, and he delivers the absolute ultimate emotional payoff of the story. He says, "You are my brother. Look, I have the exact same mark." Raman pulls back his own collar to reveal a totally identical birthmark. He explains that his mother had always told him he had a brother who was lost at a very young age. So the reason they felt such an instant, unexplainable connection shivering under that tree, it wasn't just shared humanity, it was blood. They were literally long-lost brothers.
Think about how drastically this guy's fate has changed overnight. Just look at the contrast. In the past, literally just a day ago, Diru was the isolated, mocked, destitute orphan, the so-called jinx of the village. In the present, he is a wealthy, respected businessman who is now partners with his own long-lost, loving brother. This broken family is finally reunited, and it wasn't through some calculated, expensive search, it was purely through the magnetism of compassion.
And that brings us to our final thought for this explainer. How does true compassion rewrite our ultimate destiny? See, Diru had no idea he was rescuing his own brother. He just knew he was rescuing a fellow human being in need. This Hindi folk story beautifully illustrates that when we open our doors to others, even in our darkest, stormiest moments, we might just be opening the door to our own salvation. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I really hope this leaves you reflecting on the absolutely incredible power of human kindness.